Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. Today I'll be using this photo of a woodland track in winter that I downloaded from Unsplash. I'll put the reference in the description below. I like the almost monochromatic feel of the image with the reddish earth of the track leading the eye into the scene. I thought it would also make a good subject to demonstrate how to paint a misty woodland scene and to depict depth using strong contrast of dark against light and warm against cool. So let's get started. I've roughly sketched the scene and added some masking fluid in a few areas where I need to retain the white of the paper, and I'm going to start with the misty background. I'm just wetting the top section of the paper with some clean water, and this is a very watery mix of cerulean blue and cobalt blue, just to suggest a hint of colour at the base of the background area. Just blending it into the water. I don't want any colour at the top. I want that to be very clear because I want that to retain the misty look. Just added a little bit of sepia to the background blue mix. This is for the initial trees in the background. I've let the background colour dry completely before doing this. Notice how I'm just touching this is a number 3 rigger, just touching the page, pressing down and then lifting off. The idea is to create the illusion of the trees in the background fading into the mist above. Doesn't matter if I'm going over where the foreground trees are going to be, because they're going to be much darker. Doesn't have to be too precise. It's a complete tangle of trees and bushes in the background, so it's just to suggest what's there. So I'm holding the brush at the top end of the shaft and just gently pressing down to start the stroke and then lifting off. I'll darken some of these smaller trees that are closer to us later. This is burnt sienna and a small amount of pyrrole orange, just for the base initial lightest light of the pathway. Just blocking that in. I'll let that dry before I go over that with darker tones. Always working from light to dark. This is a mixture of ultramarine and sepia for the foreground trees, and I'll be darkening parts of these later. I just want to get them blocked in at this stage. The paper I'm using is Baohong pure cotton watercolour paper. It's 300 gram rough white paper. I've used it lots of times, as you may have seen in other videos. It's ideal for creating dry brush technique over the rough texture, and you'll see me doing that shortly for the foreground snow areas. As I paint these foreground trees, you can see some of the patches of masking fluid on them. Just wanted to retain the patches of snow clinging to the trees. Again, working from light to dark, I'm just blocking them in with a lighter mix. I will be darkening them later once they've dried. Always remember that this is just a demonstration of how I choose to paint this image. There's no right or wrong way to paint watercolours. They're just good practice. No two artists will paint a scene the same way. Just practice as much as you can and you will gradually develop your own unique style. Try not to compare yourself to others. By all means copy and learn from demonstrations like this, but always be yourself and you will grow as an artist. Just get to know your paints and get to know your brushes, practice and practice, and with time you'll get better. Everybody improves with time, I guarantee it. This is a mixture of sepia and a touch of neutral tint. I'm just using the side of the rigger just to pick up the texture of the paper, to suggest little bits of earth sticking through the snow on the slope of the hill, following the contour of the hill with the brush stroke. Doesn't matter if I go over the trees, they're going to be much darker shortly. You can see as you start to put the darker darks in, the painting starts to have some depth to it, and the background misty trees start to really look as if they are fading into the mist. It's a trick of the eye with the dark contrast in the foreground. Just mixed up some burnt sienna and a touch of sepia for the darker patches in the pathway. Again, using the side of the brush to pick up the texture of the paper to create the look of rough ground. Leaving some areas smoother where they get trodden down, people walking through. But just varying the tone. I mixed up some sepia and neutral tint, a much stronger mix, less water, for blocking in the darkest trees now. Adding a little bit more detail here and there. As I said at the start, this is a fairly monochromatic looking image. I think with the way that the photograph was reference photograph was taken, it's because it's a misty day. There's very little colour showing on the trees, so I'm leaving them pretty dark, and it helps to add to that illusion of depth. Darker colours come forward, lighter colours recede. Just darkening some of the smaller trees that are nearer to us as well, so that you get this feeling of depth. I'm using the rigger here for darkening the trees, as it skips over the rough paper and creates that texture on the tree trunks. And once I remove the masking fluid, you'll be able to see the roughness of the trees where the snow is clinging to the bark. Just darkening some areas of the path as well, just to add to that feeling of depth again. The darker patches are closest to us. Just using the same mix just to put a few slightly darker trees in the background. Nothing too specific. It's all a bit of a tangle of trees and branches in the background there. And lifting the brush off as I go up the page so that they disappear into the mist. I've removed the masking fluid now. You can see the patches of snow on the foreground trees. And here I'm just using the rigger to add a few final touches and details. A few extra branches here and there, higher up the foreground trees. It's a great thing about rigger, it's a nice springy feel to it, very easy to paint very loosely, branches and twigs in winter trees like this. Just strengthening a few areas as well in the foreground. Just adding these branches to the trees gives them a more realistic look and just finishes the painting off really. Just adding a few final touches. And I think we're done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration showing you how to paint misty woodland scene. The contrast between the foreground darks and the background lights just adds that depth to the painting. If you liked the demonstration, please give it a like, always helps with YouTube. Do subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos, and thanks again for watching.